Okay, thanks everybody for being here. The goal of today's session is really for us to start thinking about if you are a coach, what kind of onboarding experiences might you be asking for? And if you're in the position to support coaches who are going to be onboarding, or entering a new role or whatever, just starting off the new school year, kind of thinking about what kind of support might our instructional coaches need in order to be successful as they get ready to start the year. And so this today's training is it's kind of assuming that some of the HR stuff is already planned and happening. So just know that I'm not big on assuming things, but just it's meant to kind of enhance some of the typical onboarding practices that are, here's your badge, here's your email, here's how we kind of orient you to a new system. And what today is meant to help us do is think beyond that. What does it mean for instructional coaches, depending on the kind of experience they have and where they're entering this role? And so we'll kind of use that to think through what kind of onboarding experiences we will design today. So my goal today, these are the three things I'm planning on offering you. We'll do a quick review of the instructional hierarchy because it kind of undergirds the lens through which I'm thinking about this. If you want a little bit more information about the instructional hierarchy, one of my previous workshops spends some time doing that, and I'll make sure to get y'all the link to that in my follow-up email. I also have an onboarding kind of matrix to help us think through who are we supporting and therefore how do we design an onboarding experience for this kind of incoming instructional coach or for ourselves as an incoming instructional coach. And then I'll also leave some time for kind of drafting an onboarding plan or an outline for the upcoming year. But this is optional. So I'm going to kind of plan to close out the session and then leave some time for doing that work live if you want to do it live, as well as answer any questions. Okay, so these are my normal norms. I use them in every session, whether it's virtual or in person. But what I do want to point out is just these icons that I invite you to unmute and engage. I said in my preview email, like, please come and feel free to unmute or interrupt me if you have a question. I'll also make sure that I'm keeping an eye on the chat for any messages. Okay. So let's meet each other. It's always helpful. We feel a little bit more comfortable speaking up or sharing when we've taken a minute to meet the room. So I invite you to drop your name, which of course we can see in Zoom, but feel free to add a little bit more information, maybe your school or your district or your location and what position you have um, in your work. I'll share a little bit about me while y'all are doing that. So I'm Linda Ryan. I'm the owner of Linda Ryan Consulting. I have nearly 20 years experience in education. That's kind of crazy. But 15 of those years I spent in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools in Charlotte. My favorite grade to teach was first grade. I have my national board certification. I'm trained in Orton Gillingham and letters. My Orton Gillingham is through IMSE. And I'm a bit of a geek. I love Star Wars, Marvel, Doctor Who. I'm in the newest season. I think this might be my favorite Doctor yet. And I'm a wife and a mom of two boys. Love to exercise and love to read. So let's see who's here today. Some of y'all I know. So this is more for you than it is for me in terms of meeting the room. Love it. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Awesome. Okay, keep going. If you're in the middle of typing, I will keep an eye on the chat and I invite you to keep an eye on the chat as well so we can meet our colleagues. But I wanted to invite us to share or describe an onboarding story. I have one to share with you. So if at the end of mine you have one to share, feel free to unmute, or if you want to type some words that describe a previous onboarding experience that you've had, I invite that. So there is one onboarding experience that I've had that I will never forget. And it is, was transitioning from a school level position as a literacy facilitator to a district level position. So I was staying in the same district, but I was moving from a school to a district office. And my position started on a Monday, which was actually really great, right? I had the weekend to kind of pull myself together and then jump into this position. But it happened to be on a teacher work day for our district. And so I arrived at the building I was assigned to, and the door was locked because my badge wasn't yet activated for that building. I couldn't get in. And because it was a teacher workday, no one was there to answer the door. Like there was nobody in the cubicles near the door that I could like wave down or anything. Um, and so I knocked, but I was feeling so unsure about what to do. I didn't even, at that point, I didn't even have like my boss's phone number to text or say, like, hey, where should I go? Kind of thing. It was so awkward. And then Doug, one of my teammates that I hadn't met yet, but I knew that he was on my team, answered the door and luckily, happened to be there that day. But he was not prepared to welcome a new team member. And so he was just as lost as I was. And so we were both kind of like, where should I sit? And he just kind of pointed to the empty cubicles. He's like, why don't you just pick one? Like, and that's all I can remember from that day. Like, I think everything else is a blur and so fuzzy because I felt so unsure about like, okay, now I'm showing up to work and like, what do I even do today? How do I even get my job done? And so I think what I ended up doing was contacting the district office where they handle badges and tried to figure out like maybe I can at least get access to the building I'm supposed to go into and get started with that. So I have no hard feelings for the people that could have provided a different onboarding experience for me. But it certainly motivates me to be thinking about this today. Like, what is the onboarding experience that we are providing for people, and how can we set them up to be more successful? Does anyone else have an onboarding story that they want to share?
They tried to onboard me in the middle of the school year while I was still a teacher and then forgot that I wasn't transferring yet.
Oh
So
my
all of
gosh.
my teacher access disappeared while I was in front of my 20 plus fourth grader or fifth graders at the time. And I was like, okay, so I can't assign your assignment because I don't have access and I can't take attendance and I don't know who to call. So
Oh
they
my
were like, oh, we
gosh.
thought you started today. No, nope, I don't.
Oh, that's so messy.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting the date wrong is a bad look.
Yep.
Yep. Love it. Any other onboarding experiences that you want to share? How about this? Have the majority of your onboarding experiences been positive or maybe had some negative aspects to them? Hit me with a maybe a so-so, a positive, negative. Okay, great. Hmm. So again, I am feeling very motivated, thinking, giving us a heads up on this on-ramp, right? The school year, we're kind of in the summertime, and for many people, they'll be starting the school year in August. And so that is my motivation for thinking about how do we enhance this experience for the coaches that are incoming, or even if we are a coach, like did we have this onboarding experience, and might some of the things we talk about today actually help us when we're starting the next school year? Okay, so the instructional hierarchy. This is a quick review. But it's a framework that was first identified by Herring and Eaton in 1978, and basically it connects student performance to instructional actions. So they've identified these. Whoop, wait, I forgot I'm in Canva and I can hit my click buttons. Hang on a second. My click buttons didn't work the last time I did this slide. So let's see if things will catch up here. Nope, that went back too far. Forgive me. Well, okay, we're just going to go with this slide because apparently tech wants us to go here. So there's four phases, but two are kind of bundled together. Okay, so you've got an acquisition phase. This is when the learner is new to something, they're not yet accurate with the skill, and their performance can be described as frustrational, right? The things that they're trying to implement take effort, and there will be a higher number of errors, right? And we can imagine this when we put it in terms of our students too, right? Like when we're introducing a new concept, we know that lesson is going to take longer and students will need more at bats to get better at it. The same is true for coaches, right? And then once you get through the acquisition phase, there's a fluency building phase. And the key characteristic here is that the learner's accurate with the information, right? Like they get it, but they're slow with the implementation of that skill. And they still have to be they're still like at an instructional rate, right? So the goal is kind of working on building their fluency and automaticity, so that they move out of being slow and inefficient with this whatever skill they're working on, and they decrease the number of errors. So consider this as somebody who has some experience with coaching or maybe understands some of the basic tenets of instructional coaching. And then the last two phases, as I said, are kind of bundled together, right? So this is a learner who's accurate and fluent with the skill. We can kind of think of them as somebody who's mostly mastered things, right? And the difference here is they're coming up on potentially some new situations that they have to apply their skills to, right? This is almost every day when it comes to instructional coaching because every time we're presented with a new person that we're working with, we're finding ourselves adapting the skills that we have, right? But because a coach is in this phase is past the fluency phase, it's much easier for them to apply and adopt those new skills to a new situation. It takes much less effort because things are more automatic for a coach in this phase. So let's take a moment to think about this. In what learning phases are your coaches or, self-identify where you might be in terms of your work? We can call acquisition 1, we can call fluency 2, and we can call generalization and adaptation 3, if you want to drop it in the chat. All right, twos, threes, twos. Oh, yeah. Okay. New to coaching. Yep. Love it. Okay. So now that we have an idea of kind of where we are or the people that we're supporting are, that's going to help us think through, okay, so what does that mean for an onboarding experience, right? Or for kind of kicking off a professional development experience for somebody who's starting in this role at the beginning of next year. So as we're thinking through this, right, the experience that a coach has matters to their onboarding experience, but so does the familiarity with their location, right? Those two pieces of information, we have to kind of figure out where do they meet in order to figure out what kind of onboarding experience will they benefit from. If they're new to a location, right, that means they need different information than someone who's simply transitioning roles in an existing location. Um, and then something else I want to just for us to think through is that existing location can mean different things, right? Think about my onboarding story where I was not changing any, I was not moving to a new district, right? But I was still new to the location and new to the team, right? So there's a difference between transferring into a coaching or leadership role in a school building from the classroom to moving into that role versus staying within the larger system, but still having to experience some of the nuances that come with a new location. So we're going to think about what might the different experiences include depending on the coach's location and their learning phase. So when we combine this information, we are better equipped to design an onboarding experience that matches our new hires' needs, right? So in this example, a coach that is in the acquisition phase, right? They're new to coaching and new to a location is probably going to need the most robust learning experience, onboarding experience to be successful, right? So I have some ideas about what that might include, not the details, not the nitty-gritty necessarily, because that's going to depend on the context with which you're on in which you're onboarding somebody, right? But what some things that you would want to make sure are outlined as a part of your onboarding experience is an orientation to instructional coaching. And, spoiler alert, this is going to have to go beyond just an onboarding experience, right? For somebody who's in the acquisition phase of coaching, they need ongoing professional development, but we're talking about onboarding today. So we at least need to give them some basic foundational coaching understanding. And we need to help them understand the coaching framework that's being used in your building or system, right? So some of those general foundational coaching skills, but also like, what does that mean here? But also because they're new to the location, they need an understanding of how we do things in your system, right? What are the instructional practices, expectations of this coaching role, language use, curricular resources, and other expectations that they will need to be able to do their job successfully. Is there anything you would add to this list? Again, I know that these are general.
Go to with things. Maybe just like the general systems of like how you track your time. So yes, you know your roles and responsibilities, but how are you keeping track of that? And then who to go to, like who you report to essentially,
Yep.
or ask questions to.
Yep. You can tell they've done this before. These are coaches I've worked with. Were you going to say something, Sai?
Yeah, a quick thing. Where does um like meeting all the teachers or like building those relationships like because I think you need buy-in from the teacher whatever like you implement and
Yep.
structure stuff around. So where does that fall in, or am I getting ahead of myself?
No, no, no. I think that's a great idea. That certainly would be an important part of being new to a location and helping a coach orient, right, to who they're supporting. Um, I didn't necessarily include it here, but it certainly lives in a potential onboarding experience, right? Um, how are we creating teaming and helping people understand the people with whom they'll be working? For sure. Great ad. All right, I'm going to keep going, but if you think of anything else, tell me. Okay, so now we're thinking about a coach who has they're in that fluency phase, right? So they have some experience with coaching, but they're new to their location, right? So they will need a similar combination as a coach who's in the acquisition phase, but not with the same intensity, right? What the difference is in terms of the coaching foundational information is we're just confirming their learning, right? It's like, hey, like let's do a check-in, right? If the interview did not cover this information, this is an opportunity for a coach to kind of confirm the things that they know and maybe orient to the coaching framework that is used in that system, right? But also helping the most important part is going to be helping them understand how we do things, right? Like what are the instructional practices, the role expectations, the people they're supporting, the language used, curricular resources, etc. That's going to be really important to them being able to start practicing their coaching work and building their fluency in this acquisition phase. So we want to be able to support any gaps in coaching foundational understanding that might still exist or misunderstandings, but we also want to move quickly enough that they can get started with practicing and they can start building towards mastery. Other thoughts here? All right, feel free to unmute. I welcome it. Okay, so moving beyond fluency, right? A coach that is in generalization and adaptation, we might consider more of a master coach. They have a lot more experience. But if they're new to a location, right, we still need to orient them to the specific information to our location, right? So, yes, we might still confirm a coach's understandings, but I believe that that would happen through the interview process. And then what we want to support them with is how are they taking that experience and knowledge and applying it to our system's context, right? The framework that we're using, the approaches that we're using, and how are they then making sense of it within the way we do things in this location, right? We have to help them make sense of here's the resources that we use. Here's the instructional practices, right? If there's an instructional playbook or specific strategies that the system leans on, we want to support them with that so that they're able to make sense of what their support looks like because they come with a lot of experience. Okay, so thinking about the phases that we found ourselves in, do we still find ourselves living in the two, thinking about any new to is anybody going to be switching locations? I think you're all staying at exit. Well, Sai, you're moving, you're figuring things out, but are we all in existing locations? But Jen and Kelsey, I know you have some incoming team members, right? And so they might not be new to your district, but remember that hard shift from being at one school to now thinking at a district level, right? It might feel like there are some things that fall in this new to location category. Go ahead, Jen.
No, and I was just gonna say, we'll have different schools too. We might have not the same teachers we had before.
Yeah, which makes a big difference. So you're all going to be experiencing a little bit of new to location stuff.
Secondary is.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Well, let's keep thinking about what this means in an existing location. Okay, so again, we're combining what we understand about the coach that we're getting ready to onboard, but we're also thinking about where they're doing that, right? So a coach who's new to coaching in that acquisition phase, but staying at an existing location will most likely need support with learning about coaching. Their orientation to instructional coaching will have to, again, help them understand what it means to be a coach, how we do coaching, what's the coaching framework and everything. And although I haven't listed the things related to the instructional practices, the shared language, etc., in here, we might need to support a coach who's in this category, right? This part of the matrix with what all of that information about the existing location means from a leadership lens, right? Especially for a teacher who or an educator who's moving from a classroom experience to now working as an instructional coach and supporting multiple teachers and supporting multiple classrooms. That is a very hard transition to make. And our understanding of instructional practices and the language that we use and some of the expectations of the role may shift because of this new lens that we're asking this educator to take, right? It is sometimes really difficult as a coach to shift from a classroom where your focus has been the students to now a coach who is supporting the adults, and your eyes are still focused on the students when you're visiting classrooms. Whereas now your focus has really switched to what are the teacher actions and how am I supporting the adults and the big people in the building, right? And so that might also need to be included as a part of an onboarding experience here. Other thoughts?
One thing that came up for me, I guess what's just more relevant in my experience is like on the teacher side, but the interaction with the instructional coach
Mm-hmm.
is I noticed there was some level of like politics that almost had to be played with like ICs, almost as like the go in between like leadership and admin and the teachers, where it's like they were more of the messenger, where admin maybe didn't want to share it, but like the instructional coach was kind of like a scapegoat in bad situations and a great messenger on the positive side. And so I'm trying to like the incentives that the instructional coach would share or the things had to be aligned with admin. Um, and so like I don't know if that's a healthy system or infrastructure. So not really a question, just kind of bringing it up.
No, that is such an important point. I have lived that. And that is actually a really important thing that happens to instructional coaches, right? And might actually serve somebody who's moving into this role, right? Helping them understand that your colleagues, right? Especially if you're moving from an existing location, your colleagues may see you differently. And those peer relationships that you had, whether you want them to change or not, right? You're often seen as a part of the leadership team. And with that comes shifts and changes into our professional conduct and our professional relationships in our existing location, which can itself be a really hard thing to grapple with. And then especially if you get caught up in if there is an us versus them dynamic, right? Between the educators that are working in classrooms and the people who are leading the building, which I agree is not necessarily healthy, right? But it does happen. An instructional coach will find themselves walking a fine line between those two things, and often feel very isolated too. So it's certainly something to consider, right? It's not necessarily something you want to outline in a handbook, an instructional coach, but it is helpful to think about like what is the culture that this instructional coach is getting ready to enter, and what might they need to be mindful of in terms of doing some leadership work. Maybe there's some leadership development that we need to support them with in how to navigate some of the politics that come with school. Great point. Other thoughts? Okay, let's keep going. So let's think about fluency for an existing location, right? So this is a coach who has some experience and they're staying at an existing location. Now, the question is this even possible? And I think yes, because it's possible that this person may have had a leadership role or was a mentor, right? Maybe they had some practice using coaching approaches as a grade level lead or as a mentor to new teachers. Or maybe they've taken a course, right, and been through some coaching training. So they're beyond this acquisition phase, right? But they're working on developing their fluency. So I do think it's possible you would have somebody moving into a role who is not as new as someone who is starting coaching and just has all of the qualities that we seek in a coach, right? Um, so the difference here with that would be that again, we might not have as much of a robust onboarding experience to what it means when we do work here at our existing location, right? But we would need to confirm their coaching foundational understanding and give them the things that they need in order to start practicing and developing their fluency, right? We might again want to support them with some of the politics stuff that we talked about, some leadership development, and helping them understand what who are they working with, right? How are we supporting them with the dynamics of the relationships that they're developing with the coach with the teachers that they support. Other thoughts here?
This could even kind of include when you are a coach for your district, but are moving to a different type of position of coaching. So, for
Mm,
example, each of our buildings have instructional coaches per building, but we also have, we're EC instructional coaches, so we're over multiple buildings. We're at a slightly higher district level. And then above us, there's even coaches. So thinking
that's right.
about like that would be kind of that fluency change of like, I know how to do coaching in the district, but here's an added responsibility.
That's exactly it, right? Like we know what we're doing, but there's more to thinking about what it is that this role will entail. Or what does coaching look like now in this shifted role? Yeah, great point. Okay, so let's think about generalization and adaptation. You will see I have nothing listed here because somebody who is in a master coach, right, and they're at an existing location is most likely ready to go. I do think that this will happen less often. I think we won't necessarily find that that we experience this in the need in terms of onboarding, right? Like you're basically not going to be onboarding someone who's a master coach, but there may be nuanced things that a coach who is needing to generalize and adapt their work, right? For example, maybe there are some new initiatives happening at the school this year. Maybe there is some new curricular resources that are the coach is going to be expected to support in the coming year, right? How are we supporting that coach with the information that they need about the existing location so that they can be successful at the job? But it's a little bit beyond that type of work is a little bit beyond an onboarding experience, if that makes sense. But I guess it could happen in some nuanced ways. Okay, so think for a minute. If you are at an existing location, are we still twos and threes, thinking about the work we need in terms of support?
Yeah, I think we're still at 2.
Mhm.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm just kind of absorbing a lot. I've been
that's
at it,
okay.
not really an onboarding, but I'm seeing a lot of like missteps when I was kind of brought on. So I've been at it
Mm,
a couple of years now. So that's why I'm not being as vocal because I'm not necessarily starting this year.
that's okay. We
Yeah.
welcome your viewpoint. What's sticking out to you as maybe having been a gap?
Um, so my situation was a little different. I was taught at the school for many years, so it's definitely an existing location.
Okay.
And then I left because I needed to go full time towards my master's. And then they asked me to come back and work with the fourth grade team and kind of coach them. And they were really happy with that. So we kind of carved out an instructional coaching role. I think the biggest thing is, and I love that. I think we have some admin team here. I don't feel like I think they're very excited about the role, but I don't think they necessarily see, or understand it. So when Sai was saying that sometimes the instructional coach gets kind of caught between, I definitely saw that. Like I try to tell teachers, like I'm your advocate. Like I'm here to advocate for you. I may work closely with the admin, but I I'm here to kind of support. So whatever, if you have a need or if you're not understanding what their wants are, then I'm here to help you out. And then sometimes I think the admin sees me as somebody who's going to go in and kind of evaluate. And I'm like, I'm not an evaluator. So
Right.
the clarity of the role is very, very important. And that's something that I wish I could like turn back time and go and fix. So I wanted to, see what I could do now to kind of fix this coming year or make this year better.
I love that. I love that. I clarity of role is so important. And it's so important that not just the coach gets it, right? Like you need your leadership to get it. You need teachers to understand it, and everybody's understanding of it should match. It should not all feel different. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, right? Like that is another thing that's a piece of this onboarding experience is what is the outline, what is the roles and responsibilities? How do we define that? But then like, can other people explain it? And does that match? Go ahead. Were you going to unmute? Go ahead and share. Oh no. Okay. Um, so I do think one thing I can share is, we always want to respect teachers in terms of offering confidentiality, right? Like we want them to feel safe enough to share to share things with their instructional coach and not feel like we're just going to go and blab everything to the admin team or, in the workroom or something like that. But I have found that it's helpful when we can be transparent and say, hey, this is something I'd really like to share with our admin team, right? For whatever reason, it's coming up for you. Like, is it okay with you if I share, right? Like, and just kind of be transparent about that. And that I think that can go both ways in terms of leadership too. Like, hey, transparently, like I'm trying to honor confidentiality for teachers, right? Or I'm trying to make sure that teachers feel safe with me. And when you ask me to evaluate them, it puts me in a difficult position, right? So how do we and open up the conversation? Like, how do we navigate that? How do I help give you the information you need? Because as a leader, their job is to keep a pulse on instruction in the building, right? And if you're the closest person to instruction in the building, there's a reason that they're going to you for that information, right? But then helping all of you talk about like what does this look like for us? What kind of information do you need to have a pulse on instruction that I can provide you? And how can I then be transparent with teachers about what that looks like?
Yeah, I really like that. I think I've had to have difficult conversations, but I think that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah. That way you have some shared expectations together, right? To kick off this new school year.
Yeah.
I'm all about naming it. Like, let's talk about it and let's name it. Thank you
Thank you.
for sharing.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts and reflections about this matrix before we continue?
Yeah. One thing for me is where does, if at all, like interaction with students line this in terms of like the responsibilities, maybe like schools or school districts do it differently because you're as a teacher, obviously your students are a responsibility. As an instructional coach, you're kind of thinking about like helping the teachers do their best job to help, help the students. It's like one layer removed. And I think it sometimes helps to have a relationship as EIC with the student. So I'm wondering where that fits into like the overall onboarding process. Obviously, that can be done like during the summer, but like during the school, like during the actual school year.
Yeah. So I think that would depend on the system, right? And also the coaching role. It's much easier to have um, an understanding at the student level if you're in like a one school building as an instructional coach supporting teachers, right? There's also different districts are doing something where it's like a part-time release, and so coaches do actually have some responsibility for student instruction and coaching. And so they have like a half day where they're maybe teaching, and then the other half of the day is coaching. So I think it depends on the way that the system is set up. I will say that it can be really challenging to have a split focus. So what I find is instructional coaches, when they enter a room, if there's some kind of classroom observation that is a part of their coaching cycle and support, then we also want to make sure that there's not disruption, right? So what was hard for me sometimes is I would enter a room and like things would devolve because I knew all the kids. I was somebody who went, transitioned at an existing location, and like some of them were my former students and stuff. And I was always like, yeah, like stay in the, stay in the lesson, So I think that can get tricky in terms of what you're working on, right? But it's also possible that the goal of what the coach is supporting might require a coach to interact with the kids or pull information from the students, right? Monitor what the students are doing so that that information then is used to support the debrief conversation with the teacher. So I think where it lives in the onboarding will really depend on the like coaching framework and approach that the system expects a coach to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
I'm reading your question, Stephanie. Curious about onboarding with teachers, coaching as a new practice. How do we give teachers some clarity? Okay. So my buddy Gene Tavernetti has shared this idea before. I heard him say it in a keynote, and because I don't remember if it's in his book or not. But one of the things he suggests, right, is doing an introduction meeting where, coaching as a concept is introduced, right? Like, what does this mean? What does this look like? What do we expect out of it? But also, like, if somebody is new to the location, introducing them to, oh, thanks, Kelsey. Okay, I couldn't remember if you had it in the book, but introducing them to the staff, right? Like, sometimes people are like, who is this new person? And what are they supposed to do, right? So, if there is an outlined roles and responsibilities, definition of the role, right? Inviting teachers to take a look at that and then ask questions about it, I think could be a good way to kind of kick that off. But I also think we have to be prepared for the understanding of that role to take and the trust in that role to take time. So many people come in with a mental model of what coaching is that they need time to see that it might mean something different, right? If a teacher's understanding of the reason that somebody gets coaching is because they have something to fix or because there's something going wrong in the classroom, that can be at odds with the goal of introducing coaching as a school improvement effort, right? Because it's not meant to be a gotcha. It's not meant to be evaluative or anything. And so that can also take time. So spending time in the onboarding and inviting teachers to be a part of that clarity work can be helpful. And when you do it all together, right, so that leadership is thinking about what are we hearing teachers are seeking from engaging in coaching and how do we honor that can be an important part to setting up the system for success. So it certainly can be if it hasn't been previously done, right? Like with coaching being new, you certainly can think about establishing as a larger group, what do we mean when we say instructional coaching here?
And one thing that we've done is like at the beginning of the year, when we start our relationship with the teachers, is to give them that like this is what my job is, this is why I'm here. That doesn't include the like I'm here to evaluate you or fix your classroom. It's here I'm to help you grow professionally. Here are some ways we could do that and really focus on like we're all going to do a coaching cycle that is tailored specifically to you for your improvement, not for, improving your overall teacher rating. And that's helped a lot, especially with new teachers, because they're like, well, I don't know why I'm getting a coach. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with you.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that because sometimes we have to say like what coaching is and what it is not, right? Like So sometimes instructional coaches find themselves falling into the resource trap where teachers just ask them to make a resource or get a resource, or I'm missing this book, this textbook, right? And while an instructional coach can be a helpful person to do that, that's not the goal of sitting down together to be doing instructional coaching, right? So if that comes out of the conversation, that's great. We'll take care of that, and we're still going to stay focused on how are we continually improving instruction. Great point. Okay. So I have a little flow chart that helps a little bit with like, where do we fall in the matrix, right? So we might start by asking, how new to coaching is the coach, right? And then we ask, are they new to the location on both sides, right? So if they come without experience and they're new, it tells us kind of where to maybe start thinking about in terms of the onboarding matrix. And if they aren't new to coaching, where do we find ourselves starting? And you'll see I put either acquisition or fluency, but we also know, depending on the level of experience of the coach, and if they're beyond the fluency, they may also be starting in kind of that generalization and adaptation phase in the new to location spot. So I'm gonna move to close just because I'm gonna stick around so that there's some time to answer questions, additional questions, and work time, if that's helpful for you. But otherwise, the content's done. So I'm gonna close this out. And if you want to go enjoy your afternoon, you can. So these are the two indicators in my coaching system assessment PDF that I'm gonna send to you in my follow-up email. But those are the two indicators. And then I also have some additional information in my ebook that's coming out later. And so I invite you to consider signing up for those ebook updates, because I've been working on expanding what those indicators are. And so once that's released, you'll have additional information. And maybe even after today, I'll find myself making a second edition with such helpful information from y'all. I invite us to, if we are not already connected, I imagine we are because you found your way here. I invite us to connect. I am going to launch a quick Zoom poll because I would love your feedback on today's session. Let's see if it will load. Yes, it's just 3 questions. So I'm going to launch that and invite you to share your feedback with me. And if you want to stick around to do some thinking and drafting about your onboarding plan or your onboarding outline for next year, I welcome you to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording and wish you a lovely afternoon.